Hello everybody and welcome to a very first look at my new album, The Highwayman, which is coming to iTunes and other platforms really soon. The Highwayman is a poem written by Alfred Noyes back in 1906, and it's become a bit of a classic favourite with its compelling imagery and tragic story. The poem tells the tale of a highwayman as he visits his beautiful lover Bess on a stormy, wintry night, and the tragic fate they both meet. Highwaymen were basically robbers who stole from travellers. They usually robbed on horseback, and they operated throughout Great Britain from the Elizabethan era right through to the 19th century, and by the late 19th century they had become quite a romanticised figure. There is a long history of treating highway robbers as heroes, often admired as bold, fearless men who confronted their victims face to face and fought for what they wanted. A famous outlaw hero, for example, is the legendary Robin Hood. Some very famous highwaymen who have been very highly romanticised include the legendary dashing rogue Dick Turpin, whose exploits have been inspiring films and songs for years. In reality, he wasn't very dashing at all, with a face covered in pox scars, but they tend to leave that part out. He was found guilty of horse theft and sentenced to death by hanging on the 7th of April 1739. Another iconic highwayman, Claude Duval, who was a French-born highwayman in post-Restoration Britain, was said to have been a bit of a hit with the ladies. On January 17, 1670, he was found guilty of 6 robberies and sentenced to death by hanging at Tyburn. His memorial reads, "Here lies Duval. Reader, if male thou art, look to thy purse. If female, look to thy heart." So, as you can see, quite a character. And finally, 2 of my favourite highwaymen, Scottish-born James Maclean and his accomplice William Plunkett. James Maclean was famously known as the gentleman highwayman, as a result of his courteous behaviour during his robberies. The pair committed around 20 hold-ups during 6 months, often in the wilds of Hyde Park. Maclean eventually earned enough money to live the high society life he'd always dreamed. However, he was later arrested after a failed attempt upon Lord Elgrington's distinctive coat, which he had stolen during a hold-up on Hounslow Heath. He was tried and found guilty despite calls for him to be saved from the gallows. More than 3,000 guests visited him in prison at Newgate, including some very high society ladies. At his hanging, his last words were simply, "May God forgive my enemies and receive my soul." His accomplice Plunkett was smart enough to escape with both his money and his life. Their story is loosely told in one of my favourite films, Plunkett and Maclean, with Robert Carlyle, Johnny Lee Miller and Liv Tyler. It's not to be taken too seriously, but it is a really, really good film. So the Highwayman poem was probably most famously brought to music by my musical hero, Loreena McKennitt, in her 1997 album, Book of Secrets. She beautifully captures the romance and sadness of the story. It's always been one of my favourite songs of hers, and in my mind it's so perfect and so iconic that I could never imagine making my own cover. After rediscovering the poem a couple of months ago, I found myself obsessed and dreaming about ways I could bring my own style of storytelling to these famous lines. I didn't want it to be a copy of Loreena's version, but I wasn't sure how it was going to work. Strangely, I was actually 2 songs into another totally different album when I sat down at my piano one evening and riffed out a catchy little melody. It sounded like The Highwayman, but at this point I was just playing and not really focused on making anything out of it. Somehow, the next thing I knew, I had 3 Highwayman songs, and I was no longer just playing. I was making an album, and it's been the most creatively satisfying work I've ever made. My idea was to break it up into songs and tell it like a mini-movie, adding in songs here and there to deepen the story and the characters. It's actually been a really, really fun process. One of the things that always drives me when making music is the visual side. When it comes to the videos or artwork, promo stuff, I have a very cinematic imagination, which I think is reflected a lot in my work. I tend to create all my own artwork and photography for my singles and album covers, but this one felt different, and I already had such strong images inspired by the amazing artwork of Abigail Larson. Her darkly beautiful Gothic artwork is so delicious to me, and I couldn't think of any other artist to capture this piece. I really think her art is going to add a whole new layer of beauty to this album, and I'm so excited she's creating this with me. It feels like it's the perfect union of artwork and music. So that's a little insight into my new album, The Highwayman, which is coming to iTunes and other downloading and streaming platforms. Stay tuned for more news soon.